To start the recording, that takes just a minute. Okay, I think the recording has started now, so we'll go ahead and kick things off. So good afternoon, everyone. This is the Wisconsin Technology Readiness Training. It is officially February 22nd, and it is 75 degrees here, and I saw in Madison that it's 65. I can't believe it's still February, but I'll take it. So I know a lot of you are inside right now, and I appreciate you joining us. But we'll try to get through this particular training and so you can enjoy the outdoor weather. As I did mention, my name is Sean Palmer. I'm the program manager for ACT Aspire, and I'll be conducting today's training. I do also have Lygia that's going to be helping me answer questions on the chat window. So the first time that you log into this as a participant, we do, since there are a number of you that are participating, we do go ahead and mute you. And then if you do have questions, feel free to just open up the chat window and send it to one of us, and we'll be sure to answer those. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and kick things off. Okay, so before we get through the agenda, I wanted just to give a quick overview of why we're having this particular training today. So this is the technology training. There typically are two different trainings that we have given at the beginning of the year. First, we do the technology training early in February because it does take some time to get everything set up from a technology standpoint. And the earlier that we can get the technology coordinators involved and get the information to them that they need, the more time that you have to get your testing environment set up. So I appreciate you, whether you're the administrator or the technology coordinator, to be able to participate in today's training. Today we're going to be walking through the schedule of events, so that'll give you a good overview of what's requested when, the different timetables for those. So we'll be going through the schedule of events there. We'll be talking about the different components and system requirements for each of those components from a technology setup. We'll be talking about new technology that we're adding to the system and a verification process around that. Talk about the infrastructure trial. And then lastly, we'll talk about resources for districts and schools. So I know some of you, this is the first time you're utilizing ACT Aspire, and in many cases, many of you are repeat customers. So throughout this presentation, I'll try to highlight the new features for those that you've been participating from prior years, but I'll also make sure that I have the basics covered to ensure that if this is the first time you're using ACT Aspire, that you feel caught up to speed and have all the information that you need. It's always a good refresher too for everyone. A few basics about ACT Aspire before we get into this too. ACT Aspire is tested for every single student in school within grades 9 and 10 throughout Wisconsin. So it's not an optional test. It's something that's required from the state. It is requested that you test online only. And if you absolutely cannot test online and you need a special accommodation, that you contact ACT Aspire, and we'll work with the DPI to make sure that we get the proper approvals and get you the information that you need. But again, this is an online test, and want to continue to move forward with that particular endeavor. Any type of accommodations that you need to assign for students would align to their IEP. This is a little bit different process that you would have for the actual ACT. You just would update that particular student's needs within their personal needs profile, and I'll go through that particular step as well. There are a couple of different key administrative training documents that I also will highlight. There's a checklist of success and a schedule of events that can be found on the Wisconsin specific advocate site, as well as the Wisconsin DPI Aspire page. So towards the end of the presentation, I'll be sure to reference both of those different documents. Okay, so we'll kick things off to a schedule of events. So obviously this is at the end of February. One thing that I wanted to highlight as we're getting ready to put all the students into ACT Aspire for the spring 2017 year, the DPI had requested that we highlight a few dates that aren't on this particular schedule, but wanted to make sure that you were aware of it. March 7th is actually the deadline to update your specific student information system with and sync that to the state's WISE data. What they want to do is make sure that in the next few weeks that you go ahead and make sure that all your rosters are updated and that they have the most accurate listing of students into their system. On March 8th, the DPI will pull the rosters and prepare the file to be uploaded into ACT Aspire, and they will have that completed by Friday, March 10th. So that puts us into the first scheduled events, which is March 14th, which is that following Monday. So just to highlight those dates one more time, we want to make sure that your local SIS is updated. Please do that with your latest student roster by March 7th. That's the deadline to be able to do that, and sync that to the state's WISE data. Again, the state will be creating that, uploading that full state implementation of student data into the portal themselves, so they'll do that all themselves. You don't have to load any of your student data. They'll be doing that on the 10th. And then the first bullet that I have on here is March 14th to the 24th. And what we'd like you to do is go through from an administrator standpoint and confirm that you have all those 9th and 10th graders in the portal. If there's someone that's missing, you would want to go ahead and upload those into the Aspire portal, but also make sure that it's updated and synced to the state as well. From the 14th to 24th, you also want to enter in any special type of accommodations that the students need. So this is called, in ACT Aspire portal, it's called the Personal Needs Profile. And many times we reference it as PNP, like, of course we can get another acronym, but it actually stands for the Personal Needs Profile, which is really the special accommodations per student. So we ask that as you're confirming the student's data, if you have any special accommodations for a student, that you update that in those a time frame between March 14th and the 24th. During that time, we also would like to ask that you start creating any type of paper request. So if you do have a few students that are going to need to take the test on paper, go ahead and create a paper test session. Put those students into those test sessions and have that completed by March 24th. We'll then pull a list of that, validate it, get approval from the DPI, and then we'll go ahead and process those. The window to set up online test sessions will be, it'll be March 14th to April 14th. Gives you an idea of when the test administrators are going to be going ahead into the forms to make sure that they are uploading those. We'll move to the second slide here. The deadline for the technology coordinators to complete proctor caching is April 3rd. So if you're a technology coordinator, please note that particular deadline. April 3rd is when you want to have all of your proctor caching set up. You want to make sure that you have all of your test content. There'll be 5 different forms from math, reading, writing, English, science, math, reading, writing, science, and English, yeah. So all those different forms will be loaded into your proctor cache server, and you're ready to go before beginning of the test administration. As I mentioned before, if you did need some paper materials for a special accommodation, you would start receiving those paper materials between April 17th and April 21st. And the big test window to denote is that the ACT Aspire testing window is from April 24th to May 26th. So you can test any of the subjects at any time during that period. Aspire is a little bit different. You can set it up in a manner that you can test, say, math one day, science the next, reading the day after that if you'd like. There's no special order that you need to test the various subjects. You can do that at your will. We just ask that you have those all completed between April 24th and May 26th. Then the final date would be on June 2nd. That's the deadline to receive all the paper answer documents. So if you do have some students that are taking a special accommodation, they had to take it on paper, we request that you have all the materials sent back to the ACT Aspire no later than June 2nd. That particular date is put in stone so that we can get all the material scored and aggregated so that we can get the reports on time. All right, let's kick things off into computer-based testing components. So the computer-based assessment, obviously, is comprised of 4 main technology components that work together to smoothly and securely deliver test content to students and preserve the fidelity of student responses. First, we have the administrative portal. So the administrative portal is a system that administrators will use to manage the student data. They also set up and manage computer-based test sessions, assign PMPs or the personal needs profile for accountability and accessing reports after testing is complete. The ACT Aspire is role-based, and users can prescribe specific roles that will control what functions they can or cannot have access to. The second testing component is TestNav 8. TestNav 8 is a next generation secure testing engine that students will use to interact with the test items. Behind the scenes, an inner component of TestNav called the early warning system maintains test security, checks for connectivity, and ensures proper content delivery. The early warning system that is within TestNav also maintains student responses. So while a student is testing, the early warning system bundles all the answers into a packet and transmits them to the ACT Aspire servers. TestNav will then wait for a handshake acknowledgement that verifies that we have successfully captured those responses. This means that we manage and verify the transmission of student responses to the ACT Aspire servers, and also gives an added benefit of the students being able to resume where they left off in case there's a connectivity or network failure. Third component that we have is a brand new this year. It's called App Check. And App Check is a tool that is used to determine system readiness. The user simply pull up TestNav, the app, on a testing workstation and click on the user icon in the upper right-hand corner to access the App Check tool. There they can perform a quick test to verify that the workstation meets the minimum requirements to run TestNav 8 and is able to properly connect to the designated Proctor Cache server or the ACT Aspire servers. So this is a brand new component for those that have tested last year. This is brand new, and we'll be going through this in more detail. This replaces what we did last year that's called System Check. So this is a new type functionality. And last is Proctor Cache. Proctor Cache is the software that works with TestNav to reduce the overall bandwidth requirement for computer-based testing by pre-downloading the entire test content that your students need and storing it locally to an encrypted format, allowing you to serve test content at local speeds versus internet download speeds. The requirements are very flexible. This does not have to be installed on a server class operating system or a super huge, robust computer. In most cases, it can be installed on a single Proctor Cache machine on a student's, in many cases, a single Proctor Cache machine can be used to service many students at a given school. So when we've done installations of Proctor Cache servers, typically They can either be done at a district level if you only have 1 or 2 schools. That one machine, as long as they have the network bandwidth to be able to access that machine, can manage many different students, or you can set up an individual Proctor Cash machine at an individual school. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the technology landing page. Now, if you don't get anything out of this entire, if you don't remember anything out of this entire training, please write down this particular URL. The technology landing page is a wonderful instrument that I use many times when I talk to technology coordinators. So the URL is http://actaspire.pearson.com. It'll bring you to the ACT landing page. You'll click on the technology setup link at the top. And this is where all of the information from a technology standpoint is listed for ACT Aspire. It contains the different technology readiness manuals. It tells you what the different system requirements are. If there's any specific technology bulletins, we list them there. And it also gives you information about AppCheck, Proctor Cash, and TestNav. It tells you what they are, tells you how to download it, and what the requirements are for each of those 3 different modules. So again, it's http://actaspire.pearson.com, and then we want to click on the technology setup link at the top of the screen. Great. Now I also wanted to give a recommendation for a couple of different documents that are stored not only on that training or on that technology landing page, but also within our Avocet site specifically for Wisconsin. There's the Technology Readiness Manual, and this has all the CBT stands for computer-based testing. That's all the computer-based testing requirements to set up ACT Aspire. It also has all the primary setup steps, so it walks you through exactly what you need to install and when. Lately, we've been seeing trends where many different schools are using Chromebooks. They've moved from either desktops type devices, and they're moving to mobile devices like a Chromebook. So we actually created a Chromebook user-friendly quick guide that has all the frequently asked questions for Chromebooks. So that's something that is also useful. If you've moved to Chromebooks, that's a good document to have kind of in your back pocket. Another document that I would recommend is the TestNav 8 error codes. And actually, that's a link. I should probably put that. That's more of a link on the Avocet site rather than a document. What that particular what that gives you is if you're having a student that's having connectivity problems, it'll give you, typically it's a 4-digit code, and that code will tell you exactly, you can enter that code in the TestNav 8 error code listings, and it'll tell you exactly what is going on, whether it's a connectivity issue with the Proctor Cash server, whether the session stalled out, or if it's the system requirements aren't meeting the minimum requirements. That's all listed there. Just by looking at those codes and kind of having that in your back pocket will give you a good kind of first step of some ideas of things to check and make sure it's working. And then the last document is the Proctor Cash user guides. So it has a number of steps of how to set up Proctor Cash, good practices to be able to utilize it, different firewall and network setups that you need to have in order to install Proctor Cash and make it configured correctly. And it also gives some little tricks and FAQs that are listed there for Proctor Cash. So again, Technology Readiness Manual, the Chromebook Quick Guide, TestNav 8 error codes, and the Proctor Cash user guide. Okay, so again, we want to talk a little bit about system requirements. So there are 3 components that have specific requirements. One is the ACT Aspire portal. That is completely browser-based, so you can use whatever browser you need to. It can be accessed on a PC or a Mac, or it actually can be accessed by a mobile device as well. But there aren't any huge operating system type requirements for that to be able to access the portal. And again, the portal is the administrative piece of the ACT Aspire system. Proctor Cash. So Proctor Cash will go a little bit more in depth of what's required for Proctor Cash, and then TestNav 8. TestNav 8, we'll talk a little bit about TestNav 8 here in a couple more slides. Where are you going to locate the requirements? Again, it's the ACT Aspire landing page. So that was actaspire.pearson.com. That gives you the technology setup section, which gives you all the information specific to the various components, either the portal, the Proctor Cash, or the TestNav particular apps. The other page that you can also access for information is the Avocet site. You can click on so when you go into the Avocet site for Wisconsin, on the top there's a alphabet, and you can click on one of them to get on a specific letter to get to the particular document that you're looking for. So if you're looking for the ACT Aspire Portal Users Guide, you can click on A for ACT Aspire Portal User Guides, or you can click on the P for Proctor Caching User Guide, or T for TestNav hardware software requirements. So a couple of good locations for you to get information as far as resources. Again, it's the landing page and the Wisconsin specific Avocet site. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, from a development piece, how all three of these are put together. And I called this particular slide the ACT Aspire Trifecta. So it all starts with the administrative portal at the top. And so that's where all the users are, all the student information is being brought in. It's where all the test content is being documented, the test sessions are creating, and you're linking all the student information to a specific test content. Why I have this listed where the portal is linked to the Proctor Cache server and is actually linked to the TestNav delivery engine, I kind of wanted to talk about how they share information back and forth, and especially from a technology standpoint. So many people ask me, from a technology coordinator, do I even need access into the portal? And the answer is yes. The complete reason why we're actually having this technology readiness training so early is that if you are an administrator, please, please, please get your technology coordinators involved now. Don't wait for a week before testing to get those folks involved. Make sure that you give them ample time to be able to look at all their resources, get the system set up, do a little bit of testing. We give them the resources to be able to do that. So please go ahead and give them the proper access as a technology coordinator within the system for your district or school. So the Aspire portal is actually, from a technology coordinator standpoint, you would be able to go into the portal and so say it's linked to the Proctor Caching server. So there's two different steps. One, you would put the IP address of your Proctor Cache server. That IP address is going to link to all the test sessions within Aspire, so it knows exactly where to go get that test content. The second piece that a Proctor Cache is connected to the Aspire portal is on downloading all that test content. So when you get into, I'll show this a little bit, when you get into the Proctor Cache interface, you want to be able to note to get that test content to be able to load into the system. Well, that is actually derived and starts on logging into the Aspire portal to be able to download that particular content. Next, we'll move over from the Proctor Cache server to the left, which is the TestNav. So that's the student test delivery application. So that's residing on the student's device. So TestNav is actually pulling all the test content, all the different form content from the Proctor Cache server. And I'll go through the benefits of that as well. But TestNav also goes up and you put in a user ID and a password. And what that user ID and password does is go up to the ACT Aspire portal and download to make sure that you have the correct student that's assigned to proper test data or the test session. And so it's that security mechanism to be able to do that handshake back and forth that the students actually, that's sitting down to take the test is actually supposed to be assigned to take that proper, that subject in ACT Aspire. So again, I call this the ACT Aspire trifecta. All of these three components are all linked. They all need to talk back and forth to each other. And from a technology point of view, you do need to have access to all three different components, whether it be within the portal to be able to download content and do your configuration settings, or Proctor Cache to be able to make sure that you're setting up all your Proctor Cache and that you have all your content. And then from a student perspective, you need to make sure that you have the most recent version of TestNav installed, so that when a student sits down to be able to take the test, they're able to get that content from your local Proctor Cache server and verify authentication through the portal. So I hope that helps them, gives a little bit more clarity of how the three are all tied together. So again, this is the first one of from a technology standpoint, what would you do from a technology coordinator to go into the ACT Aspire portal? So if you're a coordinator, you'll have access to your specific district and schools. You'll want to click on organizations up at the top, and you'll go down to this bottom section, which is called Manage Proctor Cache Settings, or excuse me, Manage Proctor Caching. And you have three different options there, as you see it highlighted. One is Proctor Cache Settings, and we'll talk a little about that. That's where you put your IP address and the designated port to be able to go into your Proctor Cache server. If you want to pull down test content to your Proctor Cache machine itself, you would click on Pre-Cache Test. And then that third option down at the bottom is called Manage Test Sessions. And what you want to be able to do is, if you're changing the IP address for some reason and a bunch of test sessions have already been created before you designate the IP address for that Proctor Cache server, you'll want to be able to go through and look at all the test sessions and make sure they have the proper IP address associated for all the test content you just delivered. So I'll review this a little bit more in detail as the coming slides go through, but I want to make sure that you, from a technology coordinator, that you do have access into the Aspire portal, and then you would be able to do that organization, pre-cache settings, pre-cache test, or managed test session. So we're going to talk about Proctor Cache settings first. And this is going to open up this particular screen here, the Proctor Cache, manage Proctor Cache settings here. On the bottom side, there's Proctor Cache server details. That selection that you have for primary host IP address, and on this particular, this is a fictitious site, but on this particular setting here, it's 10.25.180.194. That would be your fixed IP address of the Proctor Caching server that you have designated. 9 out of 10 times, you're always going to be using port 4480. In some cases, if there's another program that's running that's taking up that port, you also can use port 4481. But again, 9 out of 10 times you're going to be using, as your default, 4480. You would click on Save, which is in the upper right-hand corner there, and that would save your IP settings for the designated Proctor Cache server. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Proctor Caching. So again, Proctor Caching is software that's used in conjunction with TestNav to reduce the bandwidth requirements and accelerate the delivery of test content. So what can you do with Proctor Cache? You can pre-cache content before the test at your local network. You can reduce or eliminate redundant downloads of test content, which will reduce the burden of your internet service provider or your ISP. And then you can store an encrypted local copy of the pre-cache test and serve them at LAN speeds to students. So this is something that's a huge benefit. Instead of actually getting the content and have to worry about your ISP and having it go all the way to the ACT Aspire service to get every single question back and forth, you can get this the content utilizing the Proctor Cache server encrypted locally, and it's using your intranet versus your internet for speeds, which most cases, it's much, much quicker to utilize your intranet type speeds. The last thing that is different from last year that I want to make sure that we highlight, proctor caching is now required due to its number of benefits. Last year we had it highly recommended. This year, the design team, as well as talking to many of our customers, there was just such a huge benefit in utilizing proctor cache, and we had such a huge success rate that it's now required going forward into the spring 2017 admin. All right, so let's document a little bit of, I touched about this on the slide prior, but the scenario on the left, it's going to illustrate a network setup that does not use proctor caching. So each student is downloading a unique copy of the test content directly from the ACT Aspire servers. The diagram shows that redundant test copies are being downloaded simultaneously over the district's ISP connection while students are waiting to test. The heavy use of bandwidth not only affects how quickly the test loads for students, but also the available bandwidth for all other internet-related activities. So in many cases, we see the student usually has an iPad or and a phone, and they're trying to test it at one particular time. This actually helps with that and lowers the redundancy portion of it. And it makes it, again, where you're only sharing content with the proctor cache machine rather than going all the way up to the ACT Aspire's servers and utilizing the ISP. The right side of the diagram shows the network traffic for a test environment successfully using the proctor cache server setup. The test content is pre-cached once it's in an encrypted format to a local workstation designated in the TestNav configuration setup as the proctor caching computer. Students that are assigned to the proctor caching computer will locally access the test content without utilizing your internet bandwidth, thus decreasing the overall network traffic for your district. The closer the configured computers are to the proctor cache workstation, the faster delivery of content. So districts have the flexibility to decide where to implement the proctor caching in their network environment. Based on your local network considerations, districts can implement proctor caching machines at the district or at the school level. If you're implementing at the district, we recommend considering an added level of complexity for your connection between the school and the central location. If proctor caching computers are housed at the school where students are testing, then you don't have to worry about the outside connection. And that's what we see most when there is a district level implementation. You just need to make sure that you have the firewall capabilities to be able, that the students' devices are able to access that particular machine at the district level. So again, without proctor cache, each testing computer must individually connect across the internet to download all test content. With proctor cache, the test content is mirrored on a local computer from which the testing computers download the test content. It's all encrypted, it's much quicker. So you may be asking, where do I download this? So where do I download the proctor cache? The first one is, I've set the links for both a Windows or a Mac environment to be able to do so. Please note that the installers have changed since spring of 2016. So if you have not updated your proctor cache software itself, it may be good to uninstall proctor cache and reinstall it, just to make absolute sure that you have the most recent version on your designated server. Proctor cache is also able to install on Windows or Mac, as I mentioned. It cannot be installed on a iPad or a Chromebook. It needs to write to that local device. So again, it's for proctor cache, you can install it on a Windows or a Mac desktop, but it cannot be installed on a iPad or a Chromebook. So you're gonna download the actual, either the executable or the zip file. You'll run the installer, and then you'll start the actual service. The service actually runs as a as a service itself, I should say. The software itself, the Project Cache software, runs as a service. So with that, the benefit to that is that for some reason you have to recycle the machine, and when you bring it back up for maintenance purposes or what have you, you forget to have to start the Project Cache software itself. So having it as a service automatically will resume and kick it back off. So the entire portion of setting up Project Cache is that you install the software, you download the test content, and you check connectivity, and then you just leave it alone. It's you don't have to keep giving it updates over and over, which is wonderful. So again, the two locations to be able to download that particular test content is from the actaspire.pearson.com technology link. There will also be those installers for Project Cache as well as those links as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about system requirements. So the Project Cache server can be installed, must be installed, and it has a set of minimum requirements. The requirements are not robust, which gives districts flexibility on what machines they use for project caching. It does not require an underlying server-based operating system. It can be run on any desktop or class hardware and operating system. So the minimum requirements here, Project Cache can be run on Windows or Mac OS X. And we'll just highlight that Windows, the minimum requirements is a 1.6 gigahertz and 1 gig of RAM. And on a Mac, it can be run on an Intel Core Duo 2.0 gigahertz. And only the Intel-based Macs are supported, and it has a minimum requirement of 1 gig of RAM as well. From an operating standpoint, Macs can be installed on OS X 10.7 all the way up to 10.11. And then from a Windows perspective, it can be installed on Windows Server 2008, Windows 7, Windows Server 2012, Windows 8, and up to Windows 10. I know someone just asked about Windows 10.12. The reason why we don't have Windows 10.12 listed on there is because that's a pretty recent update that Apple just released. Doesn't mean that it doesn't work, but it's been fully tested under 10.11, and that's the last time that we baselined the test scenario for it. So it may work with 10.12 just fine, but it's been certified under 10.11 so far. So it could be here the next month or so that you see another certification that it would be supported up to 10.12. And again, on that technology bulletin, that's where that announcement would come out. So thanks for that particular question. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the diagnostic screens from Project Cache. So you can verify the status of the cache content by using the Project Cache diagnostics page. Depending on your installation preferences, you can access the diagnostic screens from your start menu or on the Windows machine or on the Finder on the Mac. You can also directly navigate to the Project Cache diagnostic screen by typing the http:// inserting the IP address port 4480. That will actually open up the same diagnostic screen. So at the top, you're going to see 3 particular tabs. What you want to do is select the test on the left-hand side of those tabs. That provides information about the testing content and caching status. It has the content details, displays the status of the individual test items. So that particular test content, you'll see kind of a stoplight type data loading system. So as you're seeing the individual forms be loaded, you'll see them start off being a yellow status, which means that they're in sequence to be able to be loading. And then as they become fully loaded onto the Project Cache server, they will turn green. If you do see a red, that means sometimes something went wrong. Many times what we've had to do at the end of that is delete that particular load and try to reload it. And typically that'll end up fixing that particular issue. So again, the test tab tells you all the specific forms. Another thing that I wanted to highlight there, so you're downloading 5 subjects. Many times you'll see 10 to 15 different download for a particular testing admin. And the reason is because it's not only downloading, say for math, for example, it's not only downloading the basic math test content that a large majority of the students are getting, but it's also going to be downloading any special type of accommodations that they need. That'll be a different test form. Audio will be another type of test form that'll be loaded. And the reason why it does this, it loads everything to the Proctor Cash machine because we want you to download all that test content at once so that depending on whatever the students have selected within the administrative portal, when they go to sit down to take the test through TestNav, that automatically will pull that given test, that content, depending on what their special accommodation is, and you won't have to do anything. So don't be aware or don't be alarmed if there's more than 5 entries for the given subjects listed in the test. Another tab is called the Clients tab. Many people don't know about this. So if you're a technology coordinator and you want to verify that a room of student testing machines are actually going to be able to test or link to your Proctor Cash server, you can go in and click on the Clients tab there at the top, and it'll show you the IP addresses of all the student machines that are connected to your Proctor Cash servers. It'll again show you a yellow, green, yellow, red type connection, meaning that either they're trying to establish connection, or yes, if they're green, that means that they have successfully received a connection and they're getting content sharing back and forth. That things are moving just fine. If you do see that it's red, it can quickly allow you to go to that particular machine and say, okay, you're having issues by being able to connect to my Proctor Cash server. What can I do? Either I need to update the TestNav app, or I need to verify that you have the proper network settings so you can access my machine. It gives you another tool to be able to verify that information. And then finally, the settings tab at the top. So if you go into, this is a little known fact, if you go into Proctor Cash and you go to download the test content the very first time, there is a very encrypted password that you have to use initially, and it's included in the Proctor Cash user guide, but it's a little buried. So if you need to change anything there, the initial Proctor Cash default password is lowercase t, 3, 5, lowercase t, the number 1, lowercase n, and 6. And my GM, maybe I'll have you just write that and put that on the chat session. Thank you for that. So what that is the default password for Proctor Cash to be able to either make changes to that particular server, or either update content or purge content or change whatever settings you need to. You can click on that settings link at the top right-hand corner, and you can change that custom password to something that is more user-friendly that you're going to remember. So again, that default password is lowercase t, 3, 5, lowercase t, the number 1, lowercase n as in Nancy, and 6. So Legia posted that in the chat session if you need a reference to that. Okay. So again, there's no need to configure individual student workstations to point them directly to the Proctor Cash machine. We just need to make sure that they have access to it. So that means you need to make sure from a network capacity that the student's devices can talk and receive information from the Proctor Cash machine. But you don't have to say, hey, point directly to this particular IP address, because that particular setting is set up within the test administration tab, or the test administration portal of ACT Aspire. So no need afterwards, you set it up, you don't need to configure individual workstations. TestNav will automatically detect and use the entered settings that you've done within the administrative portal. And the Proctor caching settings for the district and the schools will all be encrypted and stored on that particular device. and that default settings can be applied for all the test sessions. So the other nice component is why we're asking for you to go in and set up the test or the Proctor cache now is because if you set it up right now in that initial screen, what that does is any test sessions created after that point will automatically accept that particular IP address and Proctor cache settings for all the ones that they create. If you don't, you have to go in afterwards underneath that manage test session link that I showed prior and assign the updated Proctor cache IP address. So again, this is just another quick walkthrough that if you went to organizations and down to Proctor cache details, this is going to show our Proctor cache settings, excuse me. It's going to show you the IP address of the server. It's going to show you port 4480, and you can click on save. It's going to move forward with that. Okay, the other portion of Proctor cache is to be able to download test content. So this gives you a screenshot of what that particular screen looks like. Again, from a technology coordinator standpoint, you would go to organizations, down to pre-cache test, and then you would select the specific test content for your implementation. And again, those are going to be grades. It's going to say EHS, so that 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth column where it says grade, it's going to say EHS, and that stands for early high school. That's the one that you particularly want to get. It should default to just those 5. You'll want, you click on the little checkbox next to the left-hand side for all those 5 subjects, and you'll click on the blue pre-cache button on the top right-hand corner, and this will start downloading the test content directly to your Proctor cache server and encrypt it on that locally stored device. Okay, now that we've talked quite a bit extensively about Proctor cache, let's talk a little bit about TestNav. So TestNav, again, TestNav is the application that's installed at the student's machine. So whether it be on a Windows PC, a Mac, iPad, or a Chromebook, there's variable installations for those, and we'll walk through those various methods. TestNav can be installed one of 2 ways. 95% of the most of the installations are through the installable apps. And again, from that landing page that I talked about, which is actaspire.pearson.com, underneath the technology tab, it gives you all 3 links to be able to download the TestNav app to the specific environment. So it's going to give you, download all that information from the landing page. It's going to give you the desktop, iPad, and Chromebook installations. Now, in prior years, we did have a browser-based installation. There were some issues with that particular setup because the security we used was Java-based. Well, as you all know, Adobe comes out and updates Java quite frequently, and we would be ready for an administration, and all of a sudden they would come in and change the automatic updates for Java for a specific browser, and it would offset all the different types of testing attempts through TestNav. So what we've done now is move towards the installable apps. Again, we have those for desktops, iPads, and Chromebooks. And the only version that you can install now on a browser, if you absolutely need to use a browser, is Firefox ESR 45. And there is a link to that to be able to download that particular browser if that's your absolute last choice to be able to utilize TestNav. The other thing that you want to note when you're looking at setting up TestNav is your network configuration. So you want to make sure that your firewalls, your content filters, your spam filters, anything that's routing or blocking the system will allow these particular URLs and ports to be able to pass data back and forth. And that's *tn.actaspire.org, port 80, *.com, *.tn.actaspire.org, port 443, and then *.pearsonTestContent.com. One thing I also wanted to denote, TestNav has been updated a few times since spring of 2016. So if you haven't gone through and done anything with TestNav since spring of 2016, please go ahead and uninstall any prior versions of TestNav and reinstall the most recent version. And you'll know that once you install TestNav and look on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a version, it'll say 8.8. So we want to make sure that we are downloading TestNav version 8.8. Okay, so again, this is, I always go back to the actaspire.pearson.com. If your school is getting ready to download the apps, they're accessible from this landing page. And then based on the platform that you're going to be using, either the desktop app, the iPad app, or the Chromebook app, there are the various installers for you to be able to download that particular test content. Many people have managed devices. There are different installations for those. So from a Mac OS 10 perspective, a DMG is utilized for being able to either install on a local device or through a managed server process. If you're using a Windows type environment, you can use the executable to download onto each individual device and run that executable, which will install the installer. Or if you have a managed server, you can use the MSI to be able to install that particular version to all those managed devices. We also have applications that support the Linux, Fedora, or Ubuntu on both 32 and 64-bit if you're using those. The large majority are using either the Mac desktop apps, Windows desktop apps, or the iPad or Chromebook. So again, just to kind of reiterate again, if you haven't downloaded or done anything with TestNav 8 in the prior year, it may be a good idea to go ahead and uninstall prior versions, go to this actaspire.pearson.com, go to underneath the installable TestNav app links and download the latest version and install those and make sure they're up to TestNav version 8.8. Okay, students will use the login credentials found on the student authorization ticket to log into TestNav. So this is the screen that they actually will see when a student sits down and clicks on the app to be able to log into TestNav. This is the screen that they'll see. Student authorizations are printed from the ACT Aspire, and these tickets are secure materials. So they'll be collected after each testing session, and then more information about student authorization tickets will be covered in the portal section and throughout the rest of the training documentation that we have as well. So a few days, typically it's about a week before you're getting ready to test, we recommend that the test administrators go into the portal, print the test authorization tickets and have those ready so that when they go into the day of testing, they hand those to the proctors. The proctors have the students come in, they hand them out to individual students. They would have that, that piece of paper in front of them. They would insert in that username and password and click on sign in. And then what's that going to do, kind of going back to that trifecta, it's going to verify that the user ID and the password is going to verify the student is assigned to create a particular test session to take a particular test content. And that content is going to be pulled from the Proctor Cache server to be able to kick off the actual test itself. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about App Check. So again, App Check is something that's completely new this year. Last year we have a utility that was called System Check, and it was a standalone type utility that was browser-based. This year we've introduced that into the App Check, into the TestNav application itself. So what App Check does is it confirms the device or the computer is running a supported operating system, and that the operating system is needed, and that the OS version is needed to run TestNav 8. It also confirms that the device or computer is configured to launch TestNav and in the respective mode. If it's on a iPad or a Chromebook, they'll want to launch that in kiosk mode. It's available on Windows, Mac OS 10, Chromebooks, iPads, and Linux. So it's once you install the TestNav app itself, we'll walk through how you're able to access it. So the last thing I wanted to mention too is many times if you call into customer service and they're having issues, they'll actually utilize that App Check utility to see what's going on and help troubleshoot. So that's something that's it's good to know how to utilize. So again, we're going to have the TestNav screen. So when they launch the TestNav 8.8 from their respective device, they're going to come into this login screen. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a black box that has user details or user profile. So click on that, and they'll select the very first one here, which is called App Check. You'll see that at the very top. It's going to validate the system requirements, and it's going to validate that it can run on the workstation. So after they click on App Check, it's going to take them to this particular screen. This screen has two different modes. The first mode is that you do not put a configuration identifier. So in the middle, you'll see that there's a configuration identifier option. If you do not put a configuration identifier, then it'll request the connection test directly from the student's machine and connect to directly to the ACT Aspire servers. So what that means is it'll bypass the Proctor cache server. If you do insert a designated configuration identifier from the Proctor cache settings, then the portal will check the proper connect settings between the student's device and that Proctor cache server. So we'll run both scenarios. So again, the first one is if you have it blank, then it'll go directly to the ACT Aspire portal server. If you run it with a configuration identifier, it'll go directly to the Proctor cache server. So you would put that information in there or not put the information and run the App Check. The next screen is going to be able to show you exactly what shows up. Again, if you have a configuration identifier, you would go ahead and insert it into that particular field. In this case, I've seen it always as Aspire-a 5-digit code, so that's the 28473. And I'll show you a little bit in just a second how to obtain what that configuration identifier is. You'll click on that Run App Check. If you have that configuration identifier in there, it'll check to make sure that you have it in kiosk mode. It'll check the connectivity of TestNav, and if you have the configuration identifier, it'll verify that it's able to connect to that Proctor cache server and be able to pull test content. If you do not, you will not have that third Proctor cache pass link. You'll just have the top two. So again, it's checking to make sure that it's in kiosk mode and able to complete. It's checking that the connectivity from the student's device is able to grab data either from the TestNav, the ACT Aspire servers where all the test content's hosted, or if you have the configuration identifier, it'll look directly to the Proctor cache machine and make sure that it can pull and receive test content for that particular, from that particular student's device. You may want to ask, where do I get this configuration identifier, this Aspire.28473? So this would be designated within the portal. So this is, if you think of the one place where you put the IP address. So you go into the portal, go underneath organizations and Proctor cache settings, and right below the section that you would post the IP address. So in this case, in this test environment, I have 10.25.180.194 and port 4480. Right underneath that, as soon as you click on save, it'll automatically create a app check configuration identifier. So that would be the Aspire-28473 is specific to that IP address of 10.25.180.194. So that's how the two are linked. If you wanted to go through and make sure, hey, are my students' devices able to connect to my Proctor cache server, you would first go into organizations, Proctor cache settings. You would write down this number that's underneath your IP address, Aspire.28473. And I'm going to go ahead and hit one more back here. It says, and then you would, when you're running app check, you would put it underneath the configuration identifier and click on run app check. That will check again that it's in kiosk mode. It'll check the connectivity, and it'll check the connectivity to the ACT Aspire servers as well as the Proctor cache server. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a completely new functionality. It is specific to TestNav app. That's the only way that you can be able to access it. And I wanted to make sure that those folks that are used to using ACT Aspire, they know that that system check is no longer available and that they should be using this app check utility for going forward. Okay, let's talk a little bit about infrastructure trial and how you can use that for prepare for testing. So you may be asking, what is infrastructure trial? So an infrastructure trial is a dress rehearsal of the computer-based assessment. So ACT Aspire highly recommends participating in an infrastructure trial to prepare for computer-based testing. Unlike a live assessment, you will not use real student information. So instead you use dummy student information and dummy test content, so it's fictitious test content. You can test to verify that the test nav is configured correctly, that the devices can successfully run test nav, that the network will bear the entire full load. Participating staff know what to do for computer-based testing. So an infrastructure trial provides the opportunity to review your device, network, and staff readiness in a low-stakes assessment, and most importantly, provides the least impact to students. Let's move on to the next screen here. So one thing that was a little bit different from prior years, if you've utilized infrastructure trial in the past, you would go into you'd be granted access into an infrastructure trial tenant or an environment, and you kind of shared that with a bunch of other people. And what we've done this year is create a specific environment specifically for you underneath a infrastructure trial Wisconsin tenant or an environment. So what this means is there's two different environments that you'll now have access to. There's one that's kind of we call this the infrastructure trial is more of a sandbox type environment. So, from a technology perspective, you can set up your Proctor cache server. You can make sure that your test nav can connect to your Proctor cache server. You can verify and pull test content from the ACT Aspire portal directly to that server so that all of them are in sync. The other portion, as I mentioned before too, is you can also verify that, from a Proctor standpoint, you can use it as like a dry run or a test run. From a proctoring standpoint, many times they're only going in on the day of testing to be able to, administer the test. And what this does is allow them to be able to do that ahead of time, to see the screens ahead of time, to know exactly what they're going to be prepared for. They're going to be able to see the test session and see where the students are within the given test. The students, in many cases, you don't have to use students, but I've seen it used where they may take a handful of students and all log in at once, and like in a library, for example. and they'll be able to verify the connection from the student's devices to the Proctor caching server using this particular environment. And the nice thing about that is then the students have the ability to be able to know exactly when it comes to the day of testing. They know how they're going to open up TestNav. They're going to know how to navigate and what particular tools are available to them. And so it's a good process as a whole to be able to use this environment, to be able to practice not only from a technology standpoint, but from a test administrative standpoint and the student's perspective. So please go ahead and utilize this particular sandbox environment. You may ask now, how do I can switch back and forth, whether I'm in the production system or I'm in the infrastructure trial environment? So you'll know that by 3 ways. So up in the top right-hand corner, there's a house, and every single top screen is the same. So there's a house, and if it says Wisconsin, you are in the production environment. If it has a house and it says infrastructure trial _ WI, then you're in your sandbox environment. You're in that fictitious environment. So you may ask, the next question is, how do I be able to move? So in the top right-hand corner, there's the blue box that you can click on user profile. You can edit my profile, and where it says current tenant in the middle of the screen here on the lower right-hand side, you would want to go ahead and switch that down arrow and select infrastructure trial _ WI. You click on the apply, and that'll put you into the infrastructure trial environment. The rest of the screens are going to look the exact same. You'll have some students that'll be already, we're not putting too many students, we're only putting like 10 students in there, but you can add as many students you want. We do ask not to use live student data. We want to keep that for the production environment, but only you will have access to this particular environment, which is great. It's all designated specifically by district and school. So if you have access from a production environment, you should have access from a infrastructure trial environment as well. And if you do find out that you don't have access to that, you can either ask your administrator or you can call in to the ACT Aspire help desk, and we'll be able to give you access pretty quickly there. So again, just to be able to go through it, you're gonna start off in the Wisconsin, they call it tenant or the environment. So if you have a house and it says Wisconsin, that's how you know you're in production. If you want to switch, you'll click on that blue arrow, or blue box up in the top right-hand corner that says user profile and edit my profile. You'll type in for a current tenant instead of Wisconsin, you'll switch it to infrastructure trial Wisconsin and click on apply, and it'll switch to this particular screen, which is instead of it saying Wisconsin, it'll have the house and it'll say infrastructure trial Wisconsin. So you'll be able to go in there and play around. If you want to switch back, same thing. Click on the user profile, switch it to Wisconsin, click on apply, and you'll have that same type scenario, that same house, Wisconsin. So please know that, make sure that you're in the proper environment before you either start doing test data or production data. The worst thing would be that if you did a whole bunch of stuff in the infrastructure trial environment and you thought you were getting ready to do it in production, there's no way to grab that data and import it over. It's specific to that environment. So again, switching back and forth is by editing your profile in the top right-hand corner, switching to the tenant. Either Wisconsin is production and infrastructure trial _ WI is your sandbox environment. So something brand new for this year, which is great. Okay, questions. I know, Lygia, thank you so much. And I know various folks have been asking questions. So let's go ahead and look through a few things. We can run the trial, Marcy, if you're, will PMP status carry over from last year? Stephen, yes. So I think we have that one answered. I don't have it open. So from a PMP's perspective, I do want to highlight that if you do have ninth graders last year, so if they were a ninth grader and that took the ACT Aspire in spring of 2016. They were reloaded for, obviously they're 10th graders this year for spring of 2017. Their PMPs will be automatically loaded into the system. The PMPs for the freshmen or the 9th graders are not. They will have to be manually loaded. So that gives you a little bit of added benefit from testing over the previous year. Okay. Okay, so there was a question about how many clients can one Proctor Cache server handle, and that's really dependent on your network connection. I've seen it where one Proctor Cache server was set up for an entire high school and they had 800 to 900 concurrent users. It's really based on how many the mass connections that you can have and how large your network capacity is. So that gives you some kind of idea. You can really run many students at one particular time using one particular connection. Let me see here. If I have not yet pre-cached test for 2017, should I be getting an invalid configuration identifier error? My app check, that is correct. If you haven't downloaded any data and it's looking for the Proctor Cache server, it's because there's no content there. It doesn't know how to download or retrieve the rest of the information. So that's the answer to that one. Can Proctor Cache now go across VLANs if DNS hostname supported still needs IP address for? That's specific to your network. There are probably many different connections there and different variables for that. I'd have to talk to you one-on-one about how you're set up for VLANs, and I think and how your DNS is set up specific to those IP addresses. So double check with us after the training or contact the folks at the call center and we'll be able to help you through that. I said I purged from last year's test already. That's great. If you have purged all the test content, now you're able to go ahead and start reloading new content. You can start doing that now. Can I put my Proctor Cache on a Windows machine to cache users to test on Macs? Most definitely. You can have a Windows machine and they can have device. You can have student devices either on a Chromebook or an iPad or a Mac or a Windows machine. It doesn't matter. You can use either one of the different operating systems, either a Windows or a Mac, to be able to hold the test content. What service needs to be running for TSM? Service needs to be running. Not sure what that one is. For the test session management, what services need to be running? Maybe what that is for Proctor Cache, what are the service names supposed to be? The service names are, there's two of them. There's Proctor Cache, actually I think it's just called Proctor Cache, and there's another one that's called Proctor Cache Delivery. You need to make sure those two services are running on the specific machines, and those are documented within the Proctor Cache user guide as well. Here's another one. If my cache server has an IP address of 10.1.0.10 and my Chromebooks are on a different network, would the Chromebook talk to the test nav, or do I need the cache server on the same network? You don't have to have it on the same network, but you need to make sure that the IP addresses are that you're allowing to your firewall and your different utilities to make sure that you can access it. Hope that makes sense. So if you have if you can't ping that server, or you can't get information back on that particular server, or you can't run the TestNav app verification on it, you need to make sure that your firewall is set to allow that connectivity back and forth. When I run app check with my app check configuration identifier, I get an invalid identifier message. One thing you'd want to make sure is that you have the latest version of Proctor Cache, you have the latest version of TestNav, and if you're utilizing the IP address from last year, you may want to just delete it hit save, and then re-enter the IP address. That'll give you a new complete identifier, and try that particular identifier to see if it's making that latest connection. It's not cached anywhere. Take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap things up. If I'm trying to purge last year's data and it says wrong password, when I type in the, it's T35, there's no P. It's T35, T is in tiger, 1N6. So yeah, like we could make that more confusing. Sorry about that, but that's pretty encrypted, right? So again, it's T35, T is in tiger, 1 November 6. So we have a Proctor cache dispute testing about 22 sites across the state because we are virtual. I need to have a conversation with you. I assume that actually specifically with you being virtual, we'll have to work with Jennifer at the DPI office, and we'll have a meeting with you to how to configure those properly. Okay. So lastly, I wanted to go through our customer service. So we have many different ways of being able to get resources and test content and have various customer service for you to answer your questions. We have, whether it be online, which is 888-802-7502. That's Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. And then we have an email address, actaspire_implementation@actaspire.org. If you do call in, I would recommend that you choose option 7, which is specific to Wisconsin. So those are folks that are going to know, put into the Wisconsin queue, so they'll know specifically that these are 9th and 10th graders taking the summative test and have a little bit more information specific to Wisconsin. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight is in the bottom left-hand corner. If you notice, something new in the top right-hand corner of the portal. So as I was mentioning earlier, going back between environments between Wisconsin and infrastructure trial_Wisconsin. So right to the right of that, there's a new little window that's available for chat sessions. So something that we just added about 2 months ago, that if you are in the portal and have questions, you are able to chat live with an agent. You can click on that button, it'll open up another window, and you can answer your question and talk to somebody live via chat. So many different ways. You can give us a call, you can email, or now you can chat live within the portal itself. So again, I am recording this particular session. I thank Lygia and Jennifer for going in, and the rest of the folks from the DPI to going in and answering questions from the chat session. I'm recording this session. We'll be wrapping things up and posting it onto the Wisconsin-specific Avocet site. This recording will be under T for training recordings. And so it usually takes you about a day or 2 to be able to compile that and get that posted out there. But if you want to be able to utilize this for future references, feel free to go ahead and pull it down. It'll be a MP4 that you'll be able to download and watch to your leisure if you have another hour and 20 minutes to spare. So anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and have a great, wonderful, warm day. Thanks, everyone.